Flight attendant confronts Denzel Washington over cross necklace. What follows stuns everyone on board. A quiet flight turned into an unforgettable moment of dignity and justice when a flight attendant singled out Academy Award-winning actor Denzel Washington over a simple gold cross necklace. What began as an uncomfortable confrontation soon escalated into a powerful lesson in standing your ground, with the unexpected arrival of the airline's CEO flipping the entire situation on its head. If you've ever faced unjust treatment, this story will leave a lasting impact. After an intense 16-hour shoot on his latest film, a historical drama rooted in civil rights, Denzel finally wrapped filming at 2 a.m. He barely managed 4 hours of sleep before arriving at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport for his early morning flight to Los Angeles. Wearing a plain black t-shirt, jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low to avoid attention, he traveled light with only a small carry-on. Around his neck, beneath the edge of his collar, hung a modest gold cross, a cherished gift from his mother given over 3 decades ago. It was a symbol of faith and a personal travel ritual, worn discreetly and without fanfare. As he boarded and made his way to his first-class seat, a few passengers recognized him but respectfully kept their distance. Denzel's reputation for professionalism and humility was well known, especially when he traveled. On this particular day, that solitude was even more precious. He had made a promise to attend his son's awards ceremony in Los Angeles that evening, a commitment he was determined to keep, no matter how tired he felt. With only a few passengers in the first-class cabin, Denzel took his window seat, placed his cap beside him, and closed his eyes, hoping to steal a moment of rest before takeoff. But what happened next caught everyone off guard. A flight attendant approached, sternly demanding that Denzel remove his gold cross necklace, citing a vague airline policy. Passengers nearby watched in disbelief as the quiet Hollywood legend politely but firmly refused. He explained its sentimental value and spiritual significance. Despite his calm demeanor, the attendant insisted. Then, something remarkable happened. Without warning, the airline's CEO, who happened to be on the same flight, walked down the aisle after being alerted to the situation. After listening to both sides, he stunned the cabin by publicly apologizing to Denzel. He reassured everyone that no such policy existed and praised Denzel for his respectful and composed response. What began as an act of quiet disrespect turned into a powerful reminder. Dignity doesn't need to raise its voice, and sometimes, standing firm in silence speaks louder than any outburst ever could. If you've ever been underestimated, misjudged, or disrespected, this story is for you. Subscribe for more powerful stories of dignity, class, and justice. Just as Denzel began to drift into a much-needed moment of rest, a sharp voice pierced the quiet of the cabin. "Sir, you'll need to remove that necklace before takeoff." He opened his eyes to find a flight attendant standing stiffly beside him. She appeared to be in her mid-40s, her hair pulled back so tightly that it drew faint lines across her forehead. Her name tag read Rebecca. Arms crossed, she offered none of the warmth typically associated with first-class service, only an icy, impatient stare. "I'm sorry," Denzel asked, genuinely caught off guard. "Your necklace," she repeated curtly, gesturing toward the small gold cross just visible beneath his collar. "It needs to be removed and properly stored before we take off." Denzel instinctively glanced around the cabin. Across the aisle, a businessman wore a thick gold chain in plain view. 2 rows ahead, a woman adorned in pearl earrings and a matching necklace scrolled casually through her phone. Neither had been approached. "Is this a new safety requirement?" he asked calmly. "I've never been asked to remove jewelry before." Rebecca's expression hardened. "It's at the crew's discretion, sir. That particular type of necklace could pose a safety issue during turbulence." Something in her tone made it clear. This wasn't about safety. Not really. Denzel had flown more times than he could count, on countless airlines, and never once had he been asked to remove his cross. Still, he chose to remain respectful. "I completely understand safety concerns," he said with composed clarity. "But this is a religious item. I've worn it on flights for years, including with your airline. I'd rather not remove it." Rebecca's body stiffened further. "Sir, if you're going to be uncooperative, I'll need to alert the captain." Denzel raised an eyebrow, just slightly. "Uncooperative? I'm simply seeking clarification on a policy I've never encountered." By now, several passengers had taken notice. A young woman in the second row subtly raised her phone, beginning to record the uncomfortable scene. Just a few seats behind, another flight attendant named Michael, an older, seasoned crew member, watched the exchange with growing unease. He recognized the man in the window seat immediately and sensed that something was very wrong. Rebecca doubled down, her voice rising slightly. Either comply with instructions, or we may have to ask you to deplane and take another flight. Still, Denzel didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't show anger. Instead, with the same steady calm that had carried him through decades in the public eye, he looked her directly in the eye and said, "I'd like to speak with your supervisor before making any decision. This necklace holds deep personal and spiritual significance for me." Denzel's words were calm, but the stakes were anything but small. If he was removed from the flight, he would miss his son's awards ceremony, something he had promised he would never do. Yet it was clear this moment wasn't just about airline policy or jewelry. There was a deeper current beneath Rebecca's posture and tone, something that made the entire exchange feel personal. Around the first-class cabin, the mood had shifted. What should have been a quiet boarding process was now a simmering standoff. Passengers leaned in, whispering. A few subtly picked up their phones. The tension was thick enough to feel. Rebecca's lips tightened as she abruptly turned on her heel. "Wait here," she snapped over her shoulder, as though Denzel might try to slip off the plane unnoticed. Across the aisle, a businessman leaned over, shaking his head. "That's absurd," he said, gesturing to the heavy gold chain resting on his chest. "She didn't say a word to me." Denzel simply nodded. He didn't need to reply. In his decades of navigating Hollywood, he had learned how to face hostility with composure. It was a lesson handed down from his mother, one about grace under fire and knowing how to stand tall without striking back. From the rear of the cabin, Michael, the senior flight attendant, approached cautiously. His voice was quiet, but sincere. "Mr. Washington," he said, "I want to apologize for the confusion. There's no policy that requires passengers to remove religious jewelry. I honestly don't know what this is about." Before Denzel could reply, Rebecca reappeared, this time with the flight purser in tow. He was a tall man named James, and the moment he arrived, the discomfort on his face was unmistakable. "What seems to be the issue here?" James asked, glancing between the two. But Rebecca didn't give Denzel a chance to answer. "This passenger is refusing to follow safety instructions regarding his necklace," she said quickly, her voice tinged with authority. James turned toward Denzel, his expression shifting from confusion to concern. He seemed to realize that something wasn't adding up. What had started as a single flight attendant's questionable demand was spiraling into a corporate and public relations moment that would soon ripple far beyond the aisle of that aircraft. "It's a religious item," Denzel said calmly, his voice measured. "And as your colleague just confirmed, there's no policy requiring me to remove it." James, the flight purser, glanced toward Michael for confirmation. The senior attendant gave a firm nod. "Rebecca," James said, keeping his tone professional, "can I speak with you privately for a moment?" They stepped a few feet away, but their hushed voices were still audible to nearby passengers. "What are you doing?" James asked sharply. "That's Denzel Washington. And more importantly, there's no rule about removing necklaces. You're creating a situation that never needed to happen." Rebecca's reply came back louder than expected, carrying through the cabin. "I don't care who he is. These celebrities think they're above the rules. Someone needs to remind them they're not." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the first-class cabin. The mood shifted from awkward tension to outright disbelief. Denzel remained composed, his face expressionless, but his fingers curled slightly where they rested in his lap. James returned to Denzel with an apologetic tone and a flushed face. "Mr. Washington, we sincerely apologize. You absolutely do not need to remove your necklace. Please feel free to keep it on for the duration of the flight." "Thank you," Denzel replied simply. It should have ended there. But Rebecca wasn't done. She stepped forward again, speaking loud enough for several passengers to hear. "So that's how it works? Rules don't apply if you're famous enough." James turned, his face stunned. "Rebecca, that's enough." "No, it's not," she said defiantly, her voice rising. "We bend over backwards for celebrities while regular passengers get nickel-and-dimed over baggage fees and drink sizes. It's not right." Unbeknownst to Rebecca, a passenger from the main cabin, who had come forward to use the restroom, recognized Denzel and had been recording on his phone. The footage now showed Rebecca's escalating behavior, and in stark contrast, Denzel's calm, dignified restraint. Finally, Denzel spoke, addressing her directly. "Ma'am, this isn't about being famous. It's about fairness. It's about respect. You didn't ask anyone else here to remove their jewelry, just me. Rebecca crossed her arms. Because yours is a safety issue. Denzel gestured toward the woman a few rows ahead. And her pearls aren't? Then he nodded at the man across the aisle. Or his chain. Rebecca's face flushed with frustration. I'm going to have to ask you to deplane, sir. The entire cabin collectively gasped. Before she could say another word, James stepped in with authority. That's not your decision to make, Rebecca. Please return to the rear galley now. Rebecca hesitated, but seeing the eyes of every passenger now squarely on her, she finally turned and walked away. But the moment had already spiraled beyond control. What started as a minor disagreement had exposed something far deeper, a clear, public display of selective enforcement and targeted disrespect. And now, with footage already spreading, the fallout was only just beginning. Several passengers were now openly recording, and murmurs of "That's Denzel Washington" spread through the first-class cabin like wildfire. Word of the incident had quickly reached the cockpit, prompting the captain to notify airline operations back at the terminal. What no one on board, least of all Rebecca, realized was that Douglas Parker, the airline's CEO, happened to be in Atlanta that very morning for a corporate meeting. When alerted to the unfolding situation involving one of the most respected figures in Hollywood, he made a swift decision. Back in the cabin, senior flight attendant Michael was doing what he could to de-escalate the situation. He approached Denzel with a quiet apology and an offer for a complimentary drink. Denzel politely declined the drink but nodded in appreciation. I know this isn't reflective of your airline as a whole, he said, but I'm more concerned about the principle. No passenger should be singled out unfairly, celebrity or not. The atmosphere remained heavy with tension. Rebecca had been removed from the cabin temporarily, but was still arguing with James in the galley, her voice sharp and defensive. Meanwhile, new passengers boarding the aircraft immediately sensed something was off, especially when they noticed Denzel Washington seated calmly by the window, his gold cross still visible against his plain black t-shirt. Then came the moment that shifted everything. As the final boarding call neared, a sudden hush spread across the first-class cabin. Down the jet bridge and onto the aircraft stepped Douglas Parker, the airline CEO, flanked by the Atlanta station manager and the regional operations director. Parker, dressed in a sharp navy suit despite the early hour, moved with steady authority. When Rebecca caught sight of the executive team entering the plane, she went pale. This wasn't a routine inspection. They were here for one reason, and everyone on board knew it. Parker walked directly to Denzel's seat and extended a hand. Mr. Washington, I'm Douglas Parker, CEO of this airline. May I speak with you for a moment? Denzel stood, offering a firm handshake. Of course. Parker gestured to the empty seat beside him. May I? He asked politely. Denzel removed his baseball cap from the seat and nodded. Please. As the two sat down, passengers across the cabin subtly lifted their phones, recording the unexpected and extraordinary moment. No one had imagined that their routine morning flight would turn into a public moment of accountability and respect. The sight of the airline's top executive personally addressing a situation sparked by a single flight attendant's overreach sent a clear message. Some moments demand leadership, and real leadership shows up when it matters most. Mr. Washington, I've been fully briefed on the situation, Douglas Parker began, his voice steady but sincere. Let me start by offering my personal apology. The way you were treated was completely unacceptable. It does not reflect our company's values or any official policy. Denzel gave a measured nod. I appreciate that, Mr. Parker. But to be honest, I'm less concerned about how I was treated and more worried about what this says about how others, especially those without a recognizable face, might be treated in similar situations. Parker nodded solemnly. And that's exactly why I'm here. Your point is well taken. This incident raises serious concerns, not just about a lapse in professionalism, but about the potential for discriminatory treatment and the enforcement of rules that don't even exist. Just then, James returned, escorting Rebecca back to the first-class cabin. The confidence she had displayed earlier was gone, replaced by visible discomfort and the dawning realization that her actions had serious consequences. Parker turned to her, his voice calm but firm. Rebecca, I'd like you to explain to me, and to Mr. Washington, why you instructed him, and only him, to remove his religious jewelry. The cabin fell utterly silent. Passengers leaned in, waiting for her response. Rebecca shifted on her feet. I thought it could pose a safety risk during turbulence. Parker's eyes narrowed. and the other passengers wearing equally noticeable or even larger jewelry items. You didn't ask them. I didn't notice them, she replied weakly. Mr. Washington believes, and the evidence supports, that he was singled out, Parker said evenly. Can you explain why that happened? Rebecca's eyes darted across the cabin, clearly searching for a way out of a situation now well beyond her control. I was just trying to do my job, she said, almost in a whisper. No, Parker replied. Your job is to ensure safety while delivering consistent and respectful service to every passenger. Inventing rules and enforcing them selectively is not your job. He then turned to Denzel. Mr. Washington, I want you to know immediate steps are being taken. Rebecca will not be continuing on this flight. Rebecca gasped audibly, but Parker held up a hand before she could speak. This isn't open for debate. Michael will be assuming your position for this flight. We'll address this situation in full once you return to Atlanta. As Rebecca slowly stepped away to the rear galley, stunned and silent, Parker turned his attention back to Denzel, but spoke loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. We're launching a full internal investigation into what occurred here today. And please allow me, not just as the CEO of this airline, but as a human being, to extend my sincerest apologies. Respect should never be conditional on status, recognition, or anything else. Denzel's response was composed and gracious, embodying the very dignity that has long defined his public life. Mr. Parker, I accept your apology, he said, and I don't want to see anyone lose their job over a misunderstanding. Parker gave a small nod. I appreciate that, but this goes beyond a misunderstanding. It speaks to core values about fairness, dignity, and accountability. And I thank you for showing patience and grace in how you handled it. Parker rose from his seat and turned to address the entire cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, I sincerely apologize for the delay and for any discomfort this situation may have caused. At this airline, we are committed to fostering an inclusive environment where every passenger is treated with dignity and respect. Today, we fell short of that commitment, and I take full responsibility. We will do better. As Parker escorted Rebecca off the aircraft, the cabin broke into spontaneous applause. It wasn't about Denzel Washington's fame. It was about the grace with which he handled the situation and the decisive leadership Parker had demonstrated in addressing it. Moments later, Michael returned to Denzel's seat. Mr. Washington, the captain extends his personal apologies, he said quietly. We're cleared for departure as soon as Mr. Parker exits the aircraft. Denzel nodded with a simple, thank you, Michael. Unbeknownst to them, the passenger and coach who had recorded the entire incident had already uploaded the footage. The video captured everything from the confrontation and Parker's arrival to Rebecca being removed from the flight. Before the seatbelt sign lit up, it was live on social media under the caption, Denzel Washington gives a masterclass in grace after flight attendant targets him for religious necklace. Airline CEO steps in and sets the record straight. As the plane pushed back from the gate, Denzel leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. His hand instinctively reached for the small gold cross resting beneath his shirt. What had begun as an attempt to shame him had become something greater, a moment of quiet justice not just for him, but for anyone who had ever been unfairly singled out. And the ripple effects were just beginning. By the time Flight 1157 landed in Los Angeles 3 hours later, the video had gone viral. Hashtag Denzel Dignity and hashtag Respect for All were trending across platforms. The clip had amassed millions of views, sparking global conversation about how people, famous or not, should be treated. News vans waited at LAX, but Denzel exited quietly through a private terminal. He had no interest in feeding the spectacle. His focus remained on one thing, making it to his son's award ceremony on time. For him, this wasn't about headlines or drama. It was about something simple and universal, the right to be treated with respect. Back at the airline's headquarters, an emergency executive meeting was underway. In just 3 hours, the video had surpassed 5 million views. Comment sections flooded with personal stories from travelers who had experienced similar discrimination. Others praised Parker for his swift and transparent response. But the overwhelming praise was for Denzel, who never raised his voice, never invoked his status, and never demanded special treatment. He could have made threats or played the celebrity card, one comment read. Instead, he just stood his ground with quiet class. That's real power. By mid-afternoon, the airline had made its decision. Rebecca would not be terminated, but she was suspended indefinitely pending mandatory sensitivity training and reassignment to a non-customer-facing role. A short statement was issued on her behalf. "I deeply regret my actions and sincerely apologize to Mr. Washington and anyone else who has ever faced similar treatment. I am committed to learning from this and doing better." But the public conversation had only begun. Major news outlets ran features exploring bias and inconsistency in customer service. Aviation experts were brought in to clarify actual safety policies regarding jewelry. Religious leaders spoke about the right to wear symbols of faith without fear or discrimination. 3 days later, Denzel addressed the incident publicly during an interview for his upcoming film. His words, as always, were thoughtful and direct. "What happened on that flight wasn't just about me," he said. "It wasn't even just about the necklace. It was about something deeper, about how every person wants to be treated with basic human dignity. I've been blessed in my life and career, but respect shouldn't depend on fame or recognition. It should be the starting point for how we treat everyone." His words resonated far beyond the interview. Because in a world that often feels divided and dismissive, one quiet moment on Flight 1157 reminded us all, dignity isn't something earned by status. It's something owed to us all. He continued, "I truly appreciate how the airline's leadership responded. Mr. Parker didn't just speak about company values. He embodied them through immediate, decisive action. That's the kind of leadership we need more of, not just in business, but across every part of society." What could have been a devastating PR disaster quickly transformed into a moment of institutional growth. Within just a week, the airline introduced sweeping changes, new, company-wide training emphasizing respectful, consistent treatment for all passengers, a formal policy explicitly protecting the right to wear religious symbols on board, and the launch of a streamlined system for reporting discrimination. Douglas Parker was widely praised for the way he handled the situation. In an interview with Business Weekly, he explained his reasoning for getting personally involved. "When I heard what had happened, I knew I couldn't just delegate it. It wasn't about celebrity, it was about accountability. If we say respect is one of our values, we have to prove that, especially when we fail to meet it." The ripple effects were immediate. 2 other major airlines announced internal reviews of their own staff training policies. Passenger rights groups seized the momentum, renewing their push for a nationwide passenger bill of rights, one that would formally prohibit discrimination in the air travel industry. For Rebecca, the experience became a turning point. 6 months later, in a local newspaper interview, she opened up about her reflection and growth. "I had to confront some hard truths," she admitted. "I resented what I thought was celebrity entitlement. I wanted to assert control, maybe even knock someone important down a peg. But what I didn't see then was that real power doesn't come from fame or status. It comes from how you treat others, especially when you're under pressure." As for Denzel, he arrived at his son's ceremony with 20 minutes to spare. When a family member asked about the incident, he simply smiled and said, "It was just a reminder. How you respond to disrespect says more about you than the disrespect itself." 1 year later, the story still resonated. The video of the incident was being used in customer service training programs across various industries as a case study in conflict de-escalation, ethical leadership, and grace under fire. Denzel's quiet strength became a model, not just for celebrities or public figures, but for anyone navigating unfair treatment. And the Gold Cross? He still wore it on every flight, a quiet but powerful reminder of faith, conviction, and dignity. The final chapter came in an unexpected setting. At a charity event nearly a year later, Denzel and Rebecca crossed paths again. She was volunteering, and their brief encounter was witnessed by several attendees. Rebecca approached him, offered a heartfelt apology, and to the surprise of no one who knew Denzel's character, he accepted it with genuine warmth and forgiveness. What began as an attempt to diminish him had instead become a lasting lesson in integrity, accountability, and the transformative power of grace. It was a masterclass not only in leadership and humility, but in what it means to stand up for what's right without ever lowering yourself to the level of those trying to bring you down. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more content that shines a light on moments of dignity and justice. And if you've ever had an experience where you stood your ground with grace, we invite you to share your story in the comments. Because every act of quiet courage deserves to be heard.